Welcome to The Impact Equation, conversations with leaders shaping a brighter future, with me, Adam Pike.
And me, Rafi Adelstone. With our special guests, we unlock the secrets of those who dare to transform our world. We talk to architects of change, pioneers in their fields, working towards a brighter future for us all. In each episode, we dig into each element of the impact equation.
On today's episode, we're delighted to be joined by Ian Shapiro, a superstar in the world of international development and an expert in the power of partnerships between government and the private sector for a better world. Ian is the CEO of Reall, an NGO making housing affordable for underserved communities across Africa and Asia. In this role, Ian is improving the lives of millions of vulnerable people with jobs, water, sanitation, and a formula for sustainable, affordable construction.
Ian enjoyed a long and storied career with global impact, including running a youth organisation in Nepal, as a civil servant at the Department for International Development, leading UK programmes in India, and overall strategy for private investment in international development, ultimately managing an investment fund of over £1 billion. Ian, welcome.
Great. Very happy to be here, Rafi, and happy to speak to you and Adam. And you've had so many great guests on. I'm hoping to do a little bit to keep up with their shadow. Let's see how I do.
So, Ian, we'd love to start with your background. What is it about your life, your family life, where you came from that led you to a career in international development and global impact?
I grew up in the suburbs of London, and I think I just felt there must be something more to life than the suburbs of London. But I didn't really know what that was. I wasn't really exposed to anything else. And then I had this opportunity aged 18 to go overseas, and I went to Nepal, which seemed completely mind-blowing to me. I lived in a community doing community development for 6 months, and I think I learned more and was educated more in that time than the subsequent 50 years or whatever of my life. And I think I'd been there, I don't know, a few weeks, and I was this complete fish out of water sensation. And then suddenly discovering and being introduced to the fact that at the top of the hill, like a half hour, 20-minute walk away from me, which is kind of like your next door neighbor in that setting, there was what was called an untouchable community. So there's a caste system. So people seen at the bottom of society's rungs. And I thought, oh my God, I thought my mind had already been blown. And yet I hadn't even realized that my next door neighbors were an untouchable community. And just that, and then thinking what I could do to work with that and learn from that. But just this constant peeling back and thinking every time I thought I'd hit my ignorance threshold, I managed to burst through it and discover I was ignorant in a whole other way.
It sounds like an incredible formative experience. You obviously remember it so vividly, even though it was when you were just 18. What was the community development you were doing? Who did you meet? Who do you remember from the work that you were doing, and what did you achieve?
Yeah, so we worked with a group called the Young Star Club, who were a youth group. I'd done some youth work as a younger person myself, and we worked with them, and they did a whole range of community development work. They had a small sort of office space, which was a meeting point for young people, did a lot of outreach work, went to schools, talked about setting up green clubs, so about what was the connection to the environment. But really, they used what I thought was brilliant. They used volleyball as their kind of entry point to bring people together. And it was amazing how, whether you were a volleyball player or a supporter or someone who brought a samosa or a dumpling to the venue to eat and they just kind of brought people together and provided a great forum to talk about health, boiling your water, what we often, take for granted in some of the kind of UK lives that we might lead. And yeah, some really inspiring people who dedicated their lives to supporting their community.
Ian, you've worked in India, Kenya, Tanzania, Sierra Leone, in really fascinating parts of the world. How did you adapt to new cultures, new experiences, and succeed in those roles?
I don't know. I mean, Adam, I think I'd love to hear from the two of you about what we constitute succeeding in these spaces. I mean, I think that recognition of being quite humble about what you bring to each constituent situation. So often in those situations, I probably had a decent sized team and quite a large checkbook by relative standards. And so that's a strong thing to bring to a party, to a connection, to an opportunity. I think the key thing was making sure that you listen and thinking about where is the best place to learn, not feel that you need to be the one that comes up with a new idea. What ideas have already been worked on? What what progress has already been made, what's ready and could be accelerated by a little cash injection or some smart people working alongside it. And I think that's a big piece I feel about the kind of recurring themes in your impact equation pods, right? Is that these episodes, you're hearing people who are thinking, when's the opportunity to put your foot to the floor, put a bit of a rocket booster under something. And that was the opportunity I had in each of those locations, was to be someone who could help work with others where they knew what they were doing, but what they would benefit from, what they could do in terms of having an impact, was a bit of additional medium-term financing, or bringing in some accountants or some communication experts, or something that they just didn't have the resources to do, and you could be the person that helped make that happen.
So are there any sort of stories or experiences that you had of the way in which that finance deployed or that connection made a tangible difference on the ground?
Yeah, I mean, I can think of a couple of examples. And one, what I love working on was in India, where we used a fairly small amount of money in the scheme of things to bring generic medicines operators together who were providing generic medicines for HIV and malaria medication. So using the formula that exists all around the world, but building them in Indian factories at a fraction of the cost, agreeing that you could bypass what the kind of intellectual property rules were, so that they were allowed to do it all above board, and then negotiating with a whole bunch of African governments so they would bulk purchase. So you're getting Zambia and Ghana and Kenya together, and they would purchase together the drugs, which would give the confidence to the Indian suppliers to make more of them, and then would give confidence that the price was really good quality for the Zambians and the Ghanaians and others. And that way we've saved $3 billion of cost and reached many, many millions of people with life-saving medication. And actually, everyone in that process had an incentive to make it work. Clear work for the private sector. Those Indian factories were absolutely ecstatic to get these long-term contracts from a group of African government. The African governments are thrilled. They think, oh my God, we're getting this from a fraction of the price that we were negotiating with the European and US administrators. And obviously then the end recipients thinking, wow, you can reach so many more people at those costs. And actually that to me is the example of the kind of partnerships that you can work on, where you really can make big scale differences, but actually you can feel that individual case of someone who's on their HIV antiretrovirals, who's going to have a high quality of life for the next 30, 40 years that in other circumstances just wouldn't have.
Ian, you are far too humble for my liking, because you wish to explain it as to someone else's achievement, but that is extraordinary. I'd really like to push you on what else made such a profound impact. Please share it with us, because there's so many social entrepreneurs, budding entrepreneurs that are trying to disrupt. And these examples of cross-government, cross-private sector collaboration is where it's at. So please be arrogant for a moment for us.
Well, I think if you spoke to my children, I think they'd tell you there was no problem that I could deliver on that time and time again over the dinner table.
I doubt it very much, Ian.
Well, if I think about where I am now, so I work at Reall, where we're working on green affordable housing, and we're in that space because we think there are three big demographic shifts going on. So we think there's urbanization rates. So 100 years ago, there were only 2 billion people and only 20% of them lived in cities. And here we are today, over 8 billion people, and over half of them live in cities. And within 25 years, so a generation just around the corner, is going to be over 10 billion people, and 70% of them are going to be in cities. So there's a massive urbanization challenge that's happening, and it's really, it can really change the shape of the world. And climate change, of course, what we all know about that's clear. And then there's a kind of big poverty and inequality challenge. So what we're trying to do in that sense is trying to get our head up and think, what can be our contribution that's sharing ideas that can show people how green affordable homes can make a substantial difference in marketplaces, where obviously I can only do a small amount of that. The amount of green affordable homes that need to be built are just beyond our comprehension, hundreds and hundreds of millions. 70% of Africa and Asia's buildings have not yet been built yet. 70, I mean, it's just incredible the implications that's going to have for us in Europe, in North America, across the world. And none of us are really thinking about that. So we've got to build these buildings, and we've got to build them green, and they've got to be mass market. So what do I think we should do? I think we've got to show that it can work, and then we've got to share that information really freely, because we want to disrupt a market. We don't want to dominate the market. We want others to come in and do it at a scale that we could never do.
So it sounds, just hearing from that, it sounds like there is a direct parallel with what you were doing in the government, which is there's a combination of seed capital, convening power, and then expertise that you're bringing together. And I think the example you gave earlier in India, I think it was, where the British government, that's what it's done, and that's the skill capability they built, and now you're taking that capability and applying it through. What are the differences between having the stamp of the government behind you versus sort of established NGO in terms of trying to provide those three things?
Yeah, so I think you're absolutely right, Rafi, that those pieces all come together. Again, you bring different things. So if you're a rich world government, you have a certain set of convening power. You also come with a certain amount of baggage and expectations about how you might operate and how quickly you might make decisions and so on. Whereas, now I don't have that deep checkbook. I don't have the royal stamp behind me. I can't go on His Majesty's service. But what you can do is you can move quicker, and you can work with people that you feel are ready to do that and are kind of intellectually, philosophically aligned, and want to take that seed capital and take those ideas and take it to the next level. So, you could think about some of the work we've done in Mozambique will be a great example, where they just had a few years ago, the cyclone Idai went through, destroyed 90% of buildings there, and our small number of green affordable homes, they all survived. Wow. So we only had about 50 of them, but in a city where 90% of the buildings have gone, how come these easy mass market, $20,000 homes, how come those are the ones that are standing and the others aren't? And it's because we've done some smart ideas. We put some clever little hooks on that hook the roof back to the wall, really basic stuff that costs almost nothing to do, but we thought ahead about climatic conditions. But suddenly, because we had a demonstration that the cyclone had come through, the mayor wants to talk to us, the government want to talk to us and say, how's this done? It's like, we haven't done anything incredibly insightful. We've just thought a bit about what the future might hold in a region that's prone to cyclones. And then you can start persuading the local developers who, we're building 20, 50, 100 homes in Mozambique. They might be building 5,000 a year, 10,000 a year. So then working with them and saying, come and have a look at our houses. Come and have a look at how we bought a kind of, 2-cent screw that went from the roof to the wall, and that kept that house alive and standing. And the family that live there, their life circumstances are totally different because there's no insurance challenge. They're still safe. They're protected. Their kids can go to school, So but then that willingness to kind of open up and say to the mayor and say to local developers, come and have a look. Sure, take our best ideas, make them better, improve them, but do it at scale.
So just give us a bit more of a background to Reall. And so you're seeding the idea and you're proving on the ground what works. How are you enabling scale? Like what's the sort of route from what you have today to meeting that amazing challenge of 70% of homes yet to be built?
I think it's about thinking, what's your contribution? I think what we can do is we can be brave, right? We can really take risks. We can do really exciting new design ideas. So, in Pakistan, we've made the kind of first what are called net zero homes, and they're $14,000. They are lovely. Like any of the three of us, we'd be happy to live there. If that was our next holiday destination, we'd all be super happy to live there. Really smart passive cooling technique. So that means like putting in a chimney that captures the wind as it goes through the area, getting the angles right, but really smart ways of doing it. 10 degrees cooler indoors than outdoors. It's amazing in a really hot place to do that kind of thing. No electricity bills in that sense. So 50% less water. I mean, these are incredible things.
So what is Reall? Where's it come from? What's it trying to do? How does it work?
Reall comes from out of the UK housing sector in the late 1980s when it was the International Year of Shelter. And I think the UK wanted to offer something to the world as part of that. And it got a whole set of housing bodies together to come up with an organisation that could make a contribution. And here we are, sort of 35 years later. And, we've evolved a lot. The marketplace has changed enormously in that time. But we're still trying to do everything we can to have our head up and think about how we shift marketplaces. So how do we deal with those big demographic shifts are happening. We were talking about, poverty challenges, urbanization challenges, climate challenges. And we all know that the home is so fundamental to us, isn't it? That we know that where we grew up, having a safe place to sleep, to eat, to exercise, to do your homework, that makes a fundamental difference to every aspect of your future. And what we want to do is make sure that far more people get those opportunities, and that means that those homes they've got to be green, they've got to be smart.
And so how have you come up with that design? Where's that come from? Have you patented it? How does it work?
So we work with different developers in each country that we work in, often multiple developers, because again, they know their markets best. They know how to design, they know what the best materials are. And then what we do is we use some of our international best practice to try to elevate and enhance what they do. So we'll we've got architects and quantity surveyors and engineers and others. And we've obviously got decades of experience of building really quality green homes. So we'll work with a local developer and ask them, what do they normally do? What's their normal approach to building foundations? What are they doing in terms of family size? What's their approach to having a set of smart techniques where you might do things like have a single utility wall, for example, where all of your water, electricity, all of the key thing goes through one wall in a house. And you might back that onto a neighbour's, so it's a single wall that does two houses. Now, these are fairly simple ideas, but often developers wouldn't have done them, they wouldn't have tried them before, they wouldn't have seen them. So we talk through how they might integrate that into their design, and they might bring that in. So we have a set of parameters that we work with. We'll only invest in homes that are green. We'll only invest in homes that are mass market. And we'll only invest if we can share the knowledge that we produce in the homes that we build with that developer with everyone else. So put it on a data dashboard, share the kind of plans, because we're trying to get scale. So there are some fundamentals that we insist on. But beyond that, we like to work with people who know their markets best.
And when you say invest in, what type of investment are we talking about here?
So we'll do a range of things. So we might invest in, say, homes we've got in Kenya at the moment, in Nairobi. So where we're building 75 green homes, particularly for female-headed households. We've put in the first £500,000 into that. So phase one is complete. Then you use the money that revolves from selling off phase one. So you're using the market system to provide the capital for phase two, and then that will provide the capital for phase three. So you put it in, and then we will get paid back at the end of phase three when all 75 homes are built. So we'll take the risk, we'll be patient, and what we'll focus on is what's the green criteria, who are they reaching, how can we work with them to make sure that works?
Underpinning it all, Ian, obviously there's the sort of return on investment, but investment can be measured in different ways. It sounds like the social return is important. Can you share with us a bit more around sort of the economic return you're looking for, the social return you're looking for, and how you balance, if indeed it is about balancing those things?
So, Adam, we're always really focused on making sure that it's commercially viable, because if someone isn't willing to pay for something, I think the replicability is quite limited. It means so let's take those 75 homes. Let's go and talk to Gordon and Gladys who live in one of those homes and how their lives are fundamentally changed. It's amazing for Gordon and Gladys. They're there, they've got a home. They've been living in a kind of slum condition, an informal settlement with somewhere with no running water and no electricity for many, many years. But for the same money, they can actually get a mortgage that pays the same amount, and they can have a home which is a 2-bedroom home with running water, electricity, and that changes that circumstance. What it needs to do is someone needs to take the risk. Someone needs to take the risk on Gordon and Gladys that they're going to repay. Gordon and Gladys are, they're not sleeping under a bridge. They're not, they've paid rent every month. They've never missed a payment. But because they're an informal sector worker, Gladys sells mandazis and sells donuts at the local market, and Gordon's a kind of he does some welding. These are not jobs that give you a pay slip that allows you to go to the bank and get a mortgage. So what we're doing is we're taking a risk on those people. We're saying we believe that Gordon and Gladys will repay every month, and they will then be able to own their own home in the way that many of us do in many parts of the world. So it's got to be commercially viable. It's got to repay. But the social impact is enormous in demonstrating that people who are otherwise excluded from banks and mortgage opportunities on, that they're a good investment, and they're a good investment for society, but also for those communities.
That sounds amazing, Ian. That's an incredible model. What scale are you operating at today? Like, what's your loan book now? And then what's the, what recovery rate or what growth or what return are you making on that loan book?
So the loan book's it's in the kind of tens of millions, but really it's about how does that infiltrate into the market? Yeah. So it is about how you take Gordon and Gladys's experience and think, what about the other tens of millions of Gordon and Gladyses in Kenya who aren't getting that opportunity? Because our loan book and our balance sheet is never going to provide enough. So if you just look at some of the metrics at Kenya, so Kenya is a country of 55 million people, so not that dissimilar to the UK. It's going to be 90 million people in 25 years' time. And if you think Kenya has less than 30,000 mortgages, 30,000. So I could just stand on the roof of the building I'm in now. You too could stand on the roof of the building you're in now, and you'd be able to see with your naked eyes 30,000 mortgages. This is a country of 55 million people. It's got a pretty credible financial sector. It's got, good human resources. This is, it's a stable country with a good economy. So there's a kind of information blockage there where people are the banks are not willing to take the risk. Gordon and Gladyses of the world are kind of stuck in really, really nasty conditions. And we're just trying to say, we can show you that there's a win here for everyone.
And in terms of assessing the creditworthiness of those individuals, is that art or is that science? How do you go about doing that?
Yes, a combination, really. So we are trying some new techniques. So we've brought in an artificial intelligence credit assessment tool that we know that we've invested in, and it's worked in India, and it worked for 14,000 people. Incredibly strong repayment rates. So up in the kind of high 90%, very, very low default. So really successful. And we thought, can we bring that to Kenya? And we're just introducing that to Kenya now. It's been going really well. It's called Right Profile. It does a kind of assessment of your assets. So it doesn't just look at what job you've got, but it looks at, if you're a tailor, how many rolls of cloth have you got? How many sewing machines have you got? It can count the number of customers who walk up to your stall, and to give you a rounded picture of whether this person is creditworthy. That tool, I think, is a complete game changer for what is going to be possible for people on low incomes in a mass market sense. The challenge is getting banks to adopt it. Yeah. So we're talking to banks. They love it. I think it's brilliant. They obviously want to reach this 60% of the Kenyan population that they can't reach at the moment. So it's a really big market opportunity for them. They're really risk averse. And what we're doing at the moment is trying to say, how could we layer in this artificial intelligence credit assessment tool into their systems of how the banks work?
In many circumstances, it would be a government that would backstop the risk.
So we are looking at things like guarantee mechanisms and things like that to show exactly that kind of work. Again, what we're able to do is do that first kind of pushing the envelope side of it, the innovation, the new approach. So we've got some guarantees we're setting up to do exactly that kind of backstopping. But in truth, we're able to do that at a scale maybe of hundreds, maybe of the low thousands. But Kenya needs 2 million green affordable homes. We're not going to build 2 million green affordable. We're not the best people to do it. People can do it cheaper than us. We do it with always gathering data and evidence. We want to make sure that we meet every person who's going into the home. So that doesn't need to be done on a mass scale. But what we're trying to do is show that it can be done.
So the banks will be people able to do it at the mass scale. If you are able to work with other sources of finance, whether that's government or concessionary capital, whoever, to provide that guarantee, it's the banks that will then be able to overcome their risk aversion and be able to get over that hurdle and then be able to take what you've achieved and take it to scale. As in, how close are we to that? Is that something that we can foresee happening in the short term?
I think we're in a place where globally, as humanity, we've got to make this work. It's incredible how when you've got 70% of buildings not yet built, we've got to, these buildings are going to be built. So we've got choices about how they're built, don't we? So that's, do we want to build them green and smart and try to stay within 1.5 degrees of global temperature rise? Or do we just not care what happens to the hundreds of millions of homes that are going to be built in Africa and Asia in the next generation? It seems to me that we've got to change the incentive structure, for those with big balance sheets to realize there's a win for them in this, but there is a little bit of bravery needed as well.
So who is it that you want to hear that message? Is it in sort of senior leaders of global banks? Is it particularly development banks? Who is it that, at the moment isn't grasping that opportunity?
So I think the big change is really getting the banks to shift. If you think about, I'm not sure why we've landed on Kenya, but Kenya's a good example and it's replicated in many other places. 30,000 mortgages doesn't work. It doesn't work for low-income people, doesn't work for the banks. It doesn't create capital flow. Where do pension funds invest? There's significant capital that we can redirect into this space. It's giving them the confidence to do so. So what we want to do is not make it Gordon and Gladys's problem. Don't tell them they've got to get a green home and it's got to meet, because they don't have the resources to change the banking system and the supply side system. But people like us can go in, work with government, work with the banks, show them the data, open up our books, show them our repayment rates, and give them the confidence that this is worth giving, this is worth doing.
It sounds amazing. What you're doing is you're proving the model on the ground, but there's another job to be done, right? Which is not just to prove the model, but just to advocate for it, which is to take it to those finance providers, to the market makers. How do you then take the next step to market enable, market shape, market make?
Yeah, I think it's about whether you want to disrupt markets or you want to dominate markets. Okay. We don't want to be the Apple iPhone.
No.
We don't think we're the best place to be that.
But you want to inspire the Apple iPhone of green, affordable housing.
Right, exactly. So we want to work with developers. We want people who are prepared to come down market. So if you want to buy a $100,000 or $200,000 home in Kenya, you're saturated with choice. There's so much choice. These lovely homes, shared swimming pools, lovely. But that's not where most people live. That's not the reality for most Kenyans. So let's get you down to a different price point. Let's get you down to, $20,000, $15,000 homes, quality homes, and show them that people can do that. So we're trying to work with the biggest developers in Kenya as well. Say, come down market. There's a volume opportunity here. It's not a margin opportunity. You'll make, on each individual house, you'll make less money. On the $100,000 house, you might make 35%. And on your $20,000 home, you might only make 8 or 9%. But there's a lot of $20,000 homes on offer here, right? The accumulation, the market potential is huge.
Ian, where are you working at the moment? And would you mind giving us a couple of examples of housing innovations that seem to be working well?
Yeah, I think that you were mentioning, Adam, about sort of guarantees and backing earlier. There's a really great example in Nepal where we provided a guarantee mechanism with a high street bank. And we started by saying we'll provide 100% guarantee for the people on low incomes to make sure they repay. It was the highest performing product that the bank had. So we lowered it to 80%. Our guarantee continued to be the highest performing product. So we lowered it to 60 and down and down. And we're hoping to completely remove the guarantee in the next, couple of years, because it's just coming lower and lower. It's repaying, and the bank therefore wants to expand that product. And so that's just a great example of a really simple financial instrument that can open up opportunities for huge numbers of people.
And why does that work so effectively?
I think it's because we were willing to take the kind of initial upfront costing risk. So some of these were for people doing what's called incremental build, so sort of adding on to their home. So not a new home, but adding on to the home, putting on an extra room, an extra layer. And the bank's initial reaction was, we know there's a big market there, but it'd be expensive for us to kind of set it up and trial it. So we paid for the setup costs, we paid for the trialing costs, and we gave them that guarantee at the beginning that gave them the confidence to try something new. And then they try something new and they think, oh, wow, it's going to work. And now it's a big business line for them. And and it doesn't require our guarantee and our capital, and we can put our resources somewhere else.
Amazing. How many markets are you active in? Which markets, Ian?
So we're active in a number. So in Asia, sort of Pakistan, India, Nepal, the Philippines, and then in Africa, sort of Ghana, Nigeria, Mozambique, Kenya, Zimbabwe, bits and bobs elsewhere.
And is the business backed by finance? What's the kind of the structure, if you don't mind me asking, of Reall as an organisation?
So we get various inputs. The largest have been some sort of generous seed capital from some far-sighted European governments who've been recognised the opportunity and have provided us some seed capital to build an investment portfolio. But we get funds from a variety of people for different specific bits: international finance institutions, foundations, and obviously working with banks and others in the markets that we work in.
Amazing. We mentioned Apple as a product. You maybe think of Apple's marketing slogan of think different. So whilst you might not be taking the product to market at scale, you're certainly encouraging the market to think different. And if you achieve that, the market will change and you'll have that impact. I wonder if we could ask you, Ian, to sort of look ahead 5 years, 10 years. What is the impact that you'd like Reall to have made in order for you to fulfill that kind of expectation of you and your team?
I think there's two things I'd really love to see happening in these markets. So one is that it's really typical to be building $20,000, $25,000 homes. So that's just normal. It's not this weird anomaly that some brave, crazy international organization wants to be part of. So there's a much more of a mass market product being out there, and that's really typical. And the second thing is that it's done in a green certified, credible way, so that we're thinking about what the embodied energy is, what the water supply is, and that just becomes a kind of standard. That's the norm. Maybe you can get slightly cheaper financing if you're backing those kind of homes, a whole range of choices. But I think those two pieces are the really significant bits in the jigsaw we need to change.
And what's missing to achieve that? What do you need of us? What do you need of our listeners?
Well, I'd love any creative ideas that the listeners have got. I think that the idea of all of this, we were talking about it earlier on, about partnerships and bringing different ideas to the table. Each of those components you need to do. So people who might know about markets, who might know about a developer, might be working at a bank, who are interested in trialing new products. We talked about our artificial informal credit assessment, artificial intelligence tool. Someone who wants to use that, let's have a conversation. Let's think what we could do to take that further.
Well, I'm really sorry that we've come to the end of our time together. Yeah, it feels like there's so much more we can go into, so much more detail in the process in your career and your history, from Nepal all the way through. So much more we can go into about Reall, what you've achieved so far today and what you have planned. Like, I didn't know much about affordable housing around the world, and I feel like I've learned so much in just the sort of short time we've spoken together. So I'm really grateful to you for joining us. I'm really amazed and inspired by what you're doing, and it sounds incredible, and really grateful to have you on the show.
Well, it's been absolute pleasure, Rafi, Adam. Thank you. I think I've enjoyed listening to so many of the pods that you've done, and I look forward to listening to them in the future. And yeah, if any of your listeners have got great ideas, I'm all ears.
Thank you, Ian.
Thank you. Okay, Adam. Ian Shapiro, Reall, affordable green housing at scale. What do you make of it?
So for me, what I found so interesting is how Ian's early career is having such a kind of influence on what he's building with Reall. And for me, the bit that stood up was that flow, or that virtuous circle of building a mass market product, one. Second, making sure that mass market product is green, is sustainable and low cost. And actually the running costs are lower than if it wasn't built in that way. And then three, finding the funding mechanism or the financing mechanism to make it affordable for people. And so helping people in Kenya or in Tanzania to fund $20,000 homes, because as Ian said, there's only 30,000 mortgages in Kenya out of a population of 55 million. So it's getting each element of those three parts right. So for me, that's the proposition of Reall, which is to make each of those three things work and work in tandem. As a result, kind of, I guess, multiply their impact. And for me, the bit that I would like to have explored more is how those opportunities of thinking differently, operating differently, building structures that are different, can then actually feed into the scale play to go from the 100, 200, 500 homes they're building to influencing developers that are building 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 homes, because that's where the scale opportunity comes.
Absolutely.
How about you, Rafi?
Yeah, this is all about scale. What an incredible case study of impact finance, of finance being deployed in a way that, against a systemic problem, in a way that is scalable. And the problem that Ian and team have got is that obviously they're relatively small, they're relatively small balance sheet, relatively small loan book, relatively small capacity. They are making the case to the big institutions to take on this challenge of, serving the needs of the construction, housing needs of the future in a green, sustainable way, in an affordable way. They need to pick up the challenge. And I think, there's a huge opportunity here for Ian and his team to really be foundational actors of the future, to own that story and to be able to use it as a tool to drive change. But my sense is that maybe they're not quite there yet in terms of their growth journey. They don't maybe have that space, their own balance sheet, their own size yet to be able to accommodate the nature of the advocacy and the engagement activities that they're going to require to be able to take what they've learned and apply it in the market at the scale needed. So, I think I'm really amazed by the story. I think it's a fantastic case study. I'm going to be taking it to my friends and contacts at places that I work and have worked with, like the Impact Investing Institute and others, to use this as a real amazing case study of impact finance in action, because I think it deserves a much wider audience. I think, Ian mentioned to us before that, Reall is not something that's widely known. It should be. Like, they are addressing a global systemic challenge with credibility and drive and purpose and at scale. Let's get their name out there. Let's push it. Let's help Ian and his team really scale what they're doing in the wider market.
Amazing. Sounds like a great place to end it. And see you next time, Rafi.
Thanks, Adam. Until next time on The Impact Equation.